For those of you who are watching the video online, I think the best way for you to get the most out of this is to participate in all of the activities, just like people in the workshop.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming today. My name is Elaine Jaltema, and I am a grade 5-6 teacher in Burnaby. I have taught grades 2 to 7. Never had the privilege of teaching kindergarten or grade 1, but I've taught the other grades, and the format that we're going to talk about today for Lit Circles is things that I've used from grades 3 to grade 7 with, I think, incredible success. So I'm starting with the handout that says using novels to cultivate a culture of readers, and you'll see that it has my email address at the very top of it. And it has that because, and for those of you who might be viewing this from a remote location, is that realistically you can email me with any questions that you have around language arts instruction, and I will be happy to email you back. If you lose this handout, you can find it again on the PETA website. And anybody who's interested in finding out more about our fall conference can email me at president@peta.ca. So you'll see it's not a coincidence that the very first text box on this handout is telling you how to get a password for the PETA website, because if you're trying to get kids to read books and they're reading books, you want to talk to the kids about those books. But I'm going to give you a recipe, a formula today for using Lit Circles and fostering a love of independent reading that takes you absolutely not a second of your own prep time and takes not a second of your personal at-home marking time. And it will cover every single one of the previous PLOs for whatever subject you taught. I am like you, I'm a practicing teacher with a busy life, and I have to get my head around figuring out how our new curriculum works with all of this. But I've been able to say, since the last PLOs were written, that every single one of the PLOs for oral language and reading is covered in this particular formula for literature circles that takes no prep time and no after-school marking time, and will get kids reading more than anything else. Does that appeal to you? Like you, I'm a generalist teacher. That's how I'm a specialist. I'm a specialist by being a generalist. So I teach, 11 subjects or something, everything but music. And so like you, I have a whole lot of marking and prep time to do. So this is 2 subjects where you don't have to do any. The reason you don't have to do any prep time to use literally hundreds of books effectively in your classroom is because, for foolish reasons, I have spent the last 15 years reading hundreds of children's novels and writing about them to make it possible for people like you to pretend that you've read them yourself. When I started, I was hired as a grade 2 teacher, and much as I love little children, I knew that that's not where I wanted to end up. But we all take the first job that comes up, right? And so in that particular school, there was a home reading expectation. So I was required to send home a book every day, and the parents were required to have their children read to them, and they were required to sign the planner. And before very long, I saw that some parents were signing the planner a month in advance. So I recognized this is not doing what it's supposed to do. So when I was able to switch up to intermediate, I thought I still need my kids to read every day, but I clearly cannot use the parents as a police. That didn't work when they were grade 2, when it was a small picture book and the children were supposed to read it aloud to their parents. It's certainly not going to work for chapter books that are 300 pages long. So if I'm going to assign kids, I want them to read every day, and in my classroom, you can have your own homework expectations, but my only homework expectations are daily reading. And so if I'm going to expect daily reading, I better know that the kids have actually read. So that means I better read the books. So when I started reading them, I was reading them, and after a year or two, I realized, you know what, I really loved that book, but I'm not sure that I remember it really well, so I better start writing questions. And after another year or two, I started realizing, I might forget the answer, so I better start writing answers. And if I'm going to be having some of these books, I have access to multiple copies, I'm going to use them for lit circles, I better divide them into sections. And then I began to realize that this would be a valuable resource for other teachers. And then I went, Ray, what do we do with this? And he says, put it on the PETA website. And so when you go onto the PETA website, you're going to find the resources section. And that's password protected. And the main reason for password protecting that is that if you're going to see whether or not that child really read Eggs by Jerry Spinelli and says, you know, teacher, I read Eggs, can I talk to you about it? You better be able to ask them some questions and you better be able to see the answers, but you better not have had the kids have access to that website. And that's why it's a password protected site, and that's why PETA changes it every year. For those of you who are already here, I've given you, or here in person today in Vancouver, I have given you the password. For those of you who are viewing from a remote site, you will need to email me. Look up my address on the PETA website in the non-password protection section. Email me and say, you watch this video, could you please have the current PETA password, and I'll be happy to give it to you. So the way it is, this kid maybe read Ink Death at home, and says to you, I read Ink Death, can I have a conference about it so I can get credit for having done my homework? And you say, absolutely. During a quiet time in the classroom, during independent time, you come and sit here in front of me. I've got my questions, you say. I've got my questions on the computer. So Ink Death? Oh, okay. So you go on the PETA website, enter your password, you look under I, and you ask them the questions, and you take however many questions you think it does, ask them to verify that they've read it. So if they've got 3 questions right, you could say, yes, clearly you've read it. No time does it become clear to them that you did not actually read this book and write the questions. I'm not encouraging you to lie, you just leave that piece of information out. The advantage of using books in your classroom that are from the MyPETA website is you know that I've read them. I've said I've read them because 95% of those, the questions and answers, are ones that I've written. A few other people over the many years I've been doing this workshop have sent me ones, but you, of course, are a cohort that will be different. You will today go home and read books, and you will say, I bet Elaine would like that, to add that, and you will send me some so that this becomes a growing resource, because those damned authors continue to write new books. So, you know, I have read hundreds and hundreds of children's books, and then I think I'm done, but then the kids get hooked on a series or an author, and I have to keep reading. So if you read anything and you write the questions and answers for it, it will help other teachers, and it could be a growing resource. So that is the first thing on your handout, is to know how to get more things. So this is billed as a literature circle workshop, but the literature circles are the bait. They actually do fantastic things for social skills, oral language skills, argument skills, motivating kids to read. They do incredible things like that, but they also get kids to want to read more. So I'm going to start by walking you through the first little piece of, and we all know we're all teachers, so we all know that we have to break things up. Some of you are already starting to daydream and go somewhere else because I've already been talking for a few minutes. So we're going to be interspersing periodically this workshop with doing some active things out there that will help to build your class. But let's get through kind of the first page of the handout first. So why use literature circles? And this is so important that I'm going to actually read through this text box. The rest of it, I'm following the workshop in order, but I'm not actually going to read the handout, but this one I am. Because why you use literature circles is that they meet almost all the critical factors in boosting reading comprehension. Research shows that the biggest thing to get kids to be great readers is to read a lot. If you want kids to be better runners, you don't spend endless hours telling them about running techniques. You do a little bit about running techniques, but you get them to do a lot of running. And after they've run a little bit, you give them a little bit of coaching and you say, okay, now if you move your arm this way or your leg this way, then. And so that's what you do with literature circles as well. By any kind of a reading program, if you do something that inspires kids to do a lot of reading, you can do a little tweaking, a little finesse, a little strategies along the way, but the important thing is you want them to read a lot. We know that the next important thing is combining thinking and reading. We don't teach critical thinking as one subject and don't embed it in everything else. Critical thinking has to be embedded in everything in order for it to be effective. It's how we go through life. Collaborative learning. We know that if we go through the Help Wanted section in Craigslist, we know that the biggest thing that people want is somebody who can get along with others, interpersonal skills. And literature circles do that brilliantly. And we know that we want kids to be able to talk about their responses to reading. Letter B, they get kids hooked on reading. So you introduce them to, in your first literature circle of the year, to an author or a series that they're going to love, and that you don't offer it for your second time around, and guess what they do? They go to the library to get the sequel or another book by the same author, and so already that they're reading more than you required them to do. They create a reading culture in the classroom. They develop community, self-direction, cooperation, social skills, and thinking. And they introduce children to authors and series which inspire them to read more independently, which in turn develops fluency. You later on, if you're in person here, are going to be able to see a videotape of one of my classes in action. I only have video samples of one class, and it's my 2009 and 2010 class, simply because as a regular classroom teacher like all of you, it's really difficult to figure out how to manage my class, find somebody who will come in and videotape me while the other 22 children are working on something quietly in the classroom. It's challenging to do the videotaping part. So this is a pretty neat class, and so I've prepared all the statistics that you're going to look at today from based on this one class. I will sometimes change their names. I have their permission, the kids' permission, the parents' permission to use their names, but I'm going to try, and so you're going to be left today wondering which real name and which made-up name, but I have to keep these kids straight. So I'm going to talk to you about two little boys who were in grade 4, Caduce and Shafay, and they were wonderful boys, high energy boys. Really enthusiastic and very competitive, and they had that wonderful best friends relationship of being both love and hate. So they were so competitive with each other, sometimes they'd be really mad at each other, but they also were thick as glue. And one day the recess bell went and they were supposed to go out the door. Instead of that, the two of them ran full speed for my desk across the room. Just, I don't encourage running, it's not supposed to happen, but here's what happened. Caduce said, Miss J, you have to settle an argument. What's the argument? Shafay said, well, Caduce says that Andrew Clements is the best author, and I say it's Jerry Spinelli. Which one of us is right? So those two boys chose, these were highly competitive, skilled athletes who normally spend all their recess and lunch playing soccer. They sat down of their own choice at recess time, making out their arguments about why one author was better than the other. And I thought, do I have a problem here? Isn't this exactly what you want to happen? So at recess and lunch, my kids, as well as playing soccer and doing all those things, are talking about what's happening in the books and comparing authors, and I think I'm doing something right. Why literature circles hook kids on reading? They like the way they feel. Do any of you have kids? Have you ever taught kids that actually like to test one another? Yeah. Can you tell me, what do you think is? They love to do that. And literature circles does that, some of that kind of competitive game show kind of thing. How many of you have ever been a part of an adult book club? Okay. So I have, and I created this model for lit circles based on that. And no matter what book club I have been in, I have been so frustrated that there would be a very small percentage who've actually done the reading. And the others say, well, I didn't actually get a chance to read the book, but I wanted to hear what everybody else had to say. Oh, come on, feed me, not fair. So you want to build in the incentives, remembering how my grade 2 kids had their parents sign the planner a month in advance. So you have to build in incentives for the kids to want to read, and they and you have to know that you have a system in place that will actually catch them if they try and bluff. So there's no motivation to bluff, and this recipe does that.